বৰঠাকুৰ IS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা
Hello everyone, welcome to Hindu Analysis for 25th August 2021. Hope you are all doing well and staying safe. So let us begin with the first article today. India pips US as hub for manufacturing. So the Global Manufacturing Risk Index is an annually released index by a company called Wakefield, right? It's a Cushman and Wakefield is a property consultant firm based out of America, and yearly they release a index that marks how countries are doing in terms of manufacturing capabilities, or how friendly it is for companies to invest in manufacturing in that particular country. Now this index is based on, or this index is assessed on 4 key areas. One is bounce back ability, the second is the conditions, third the cost, and finally what is the risk potential of investing in that country, or how the manufacturing is in that country, right? Risk for investing in manufacturing in that country. Now when you look at the factor or the key area or the assessment area of bounce back ability, projected ability to restart manufacturing operation as confinement measures are relaxed and business begins to return to normal. This is in regards to COVID-19 lockdowns, subsequent closures, and so on and so forth, right? On the second aspect, you look at conditions, business environment, including the availability of talent and access to market. Not only that, the regime regulation or the law regime are also looked at it. How friendly are the processes? How friendly is the legislature? How business friendly is the local officials, and so on and so forth. There are multiple parameters that actually make an state or a country conducive for business. That is what business environment is. Now when you look at the other aspect, that is cost, operating cost, cheap labor, cheap raw materials, right, lower tax regime, multiple other things play into operating costs. As I said, labor, electricity, and real estate. One of the things that is always overlooked, or most of the time overlooked when you look at investments, is the cost of real estate. Depending on the area, depending on the location, depending on the size of the reality or real estate that you want for your manufacturing industry or your manufacturing investment, prices do vary, right? If you are in an urban area, the price might vary. If you are looking for the same amount of land in a rural area, the price might be different. So that is also one factor that needs to be considered. Now final and the fourth is the risks, which is the political risk, economic risk, and environmental risk. Now again, these are to be looked at on an independent stage, but nonetheless these are the 4 areas where the Global Manufacturing Risk Index looks at. Since 2019, India has been climbing one rank every year. In 2019, India was ranked 4th. In 2020, it was ranked 3rd. In 2021, India is ranked 2. So this year the speciality is that we surpassed the Americans, right? US was second ranked in 2020, we were 3rd. Number 1 always is being occupied by the Chinese because of their ecosystem that they have nurtured there, and they had successfully transformed their economy into a manufacturing or an industrialized economy. So China occupies that first place. Till last year, US was occupying the second place, we were in the 3rd. Now we are in the second place, surpassing the Americans, that is US. Again, this is a good sign in the sense that our economy is recovering. There are a lot of hurdles in our economic recovery. There are various issues, not only in terms of investments, but also in terms of regulations. But in the sense, recently we have seen bits of good news in terms of Indian government deciding to amend the retrospective tax law, which was the most regressive of all, which made the investment climate a little bit stable. But a lot has to be done in future in terms of policy, in terms of legislation, in terms of regulations also, in order to make India investment friendly. One of the reasons as to why India surpassed US is, it is being attributed to the fact that the Chinese behavior, right? China has been very hostile, not only with other countries, internally also they have been very hostile with countries. Their companies, not countries. On countries they have been hostile for a long period of time, but recently there has been a crackdown on manufacturing companies, IT companies inside China. The biggest of the news that we saw in terms of the Communist Party or the Chinese government crackdown on IT companies was the Jack Ma story, right? He said something, or they nationalized his assets in a sense within a span of 6 months. He was the richest man in the world, or one of the richest man in the world, and the Chinese government decided that it would no longer be the case, and they nationalized his company and his assets. And we don't know where he's right now. All we know is he's alive. But nonetheless, the Chinese government has been carrying out a lot of reforms internally on manufacturing units and other sectors. So because of that, and the pandemic has brought out a little bit of a dimension that wasn't known to investors earlier, the dark dimension of the Chinese government, which kind of controlled everything that was being exported. During pandemic, one of the biggest things that countries faced was China was preventing manufacturing units exporting critically required materials to outside countries like surgical, medical, or whatever it may be. China was actually holding on, depending on how the relationship was between China and the said country. So as a result of it, we are seeing many manufacturing investments moving out of China, and they find India a favorable destination. There are empty number of problems in Indian investment ecosystem, but when compared to the Chinese ecosystem or the Chinese political regime and the economic regime and the environmental regime, India is more conducive and more friendly. In the sense, we need a lot of reforms in our ecosystem, but nonetheless, compared to the Chinese political system, ours is much more liberal. So that is one of the reason that is being attributed to the reason as to why India overtook America in terms of this ranking risk index. So moving on to the next article, open digital systems to unlock $700 billion opportunities by 2030. So what is open digital ecosystems? So these are the services that citizens are being provided either by the government or by the private sector. Recently, India has been going through its own digital transformation. The largest of the public digital infrastructure in India comes from 3 platforms, right? That is the Aadhaar platform, the UPI platform, and with the vaccination drive and COVID-19 scenario, the CoWIN platform. CoWIN platform is the central digital platform for India's response to COVID, India's methodology to track and keep track of data, track COVID-19, and also its vaccination drive. So the largest public infrastructure or digital infrastructure in India comes from 3 platforms, and these 3 platforms happen to be the world's largest public digital platforms also. Of many, these are 3, and these occupy higher levels, higher ranks compared to other digital platforms of other countries. Now these kinds of access to ecosystems, or this kind of development in the direction of digital ecosystems, which are open to public, which are open for both private and public sector investment and opportunities or exploration, means that we are going to see a transformation of providing services or making services available or increasing the access of service to public in our country, right? COVID-19 kind of fast-tracked the country's pivot to digitization. We were forced to digitize. Let us look at one example. Let us look at education sector itself. What was the earlier methodology of education? It was classroom based. It was classroom centric. It was physical. It was location centric. You had to go to a location. You had to sit in a classroom. Then you are given your education. What did the COVID-19 did? It removed the physical barrier. Since everything moved online, it didn't matter where you sat or where you were located, or even it didn't matter where the person who was teaching you the education located. One can be at one end of India, and the student can be at, let us say, in Kanyakumari. Despite that, if I had a good internet connection, if I had a bare minimum phone that can handle a 2G or the 3G connection, the teacher can reach out to you and he can teach you whatever the subject you are interested in. So that is the transformation that we are talking about here. Whatever the barriers that we faced or we held earlier were removed because of digitization process, right? So when these kinds of transformation happens, these kinds of pivots happen in sectors, either it may be the education sector, it may be the economy, it can be agriculture, it can be manufacturing, or the healthcare, the most important of all, the healthcare. So because of that, India is going to see a lot of investments, lot of growth in digital ecosystem, particularly in the sectors of health, agriculture, MSMEs, education. E-land records is something that is being explored for the last 10 to 15 years in various states on various points of time. But at the central level, there is need for this kinds of e-land records reform. It needs a central push, right? Various state governments. You had Gujarat pursuing its own digital land record system. You had Maharashtra pursuing their own land record system. Right now, Andhra Pradesh is also going through a phase where they are trying to digitize their land records, and they are trying to make it more a digital ecosystem rather than an office based ecosystem. So they are also going through that, but there lacks a centralized e-land record reform or a scheme from the central government. That is to be discussed in later point of time, but that is also on the offing, meaning it is also being worked on. But the other aspects, the education system, the agricultural, the healthcare, they were on the path of reforms, but because of COVID-19, the adaptation had to be rapid. That is why we are seeing transformation in these sectors in the space of digital ecosystem. Now the idea is that these kinds of digital platforms, particularly open digital platforms, help in systematic creation of value generation. So because of these rapid transformation in our digital ecosystems, and also the wider adaptation of the said open digital ecosystems, India is poised well to unlock some 700 billion worth of opportunities by 2030. Now this will again help India in becoming the 5 trillion economy that the current government has set its goal on, but nonetheless this is the step in the right direction. So to revise, the major 3 platforms that India was able to successfully launch and sustain and transform are the Aadhaar platform, the UPI platform, and the CoWIN platform. These are the biggest platforms in the world. One of the biggest platforms, or at least one of the biggest platforms in the world. Now, because of this digital transformation, we have created a scope for digital ecosystems, particularly open digital ecosystems. Because of these open digital ecosystems, the way the services are being given to public is transformed, right? Whatever the barriers, whatever the roadblocks that were earlier in place, which prevented the government from serving its people, because of this digital transformation, those earlier roadblocks are no longer in place, because it took away a lot of physicality from that interaction. Because of this digital transformation, there is no need for a physical interaction, taking away with it a lot of barriers. When we discuss digital transformation, we also have to allocate some thought to the digital divide. Yes, we have digital divide that we have been discussing for a long period of time, but we are also making strides in that direction. But we'll reach a point where the digital divide will no longer be a issue. But prior to that, the number of people accessing services which they weren't able to earlier has gone up. That is a welcome sign. That is the digital transformation that we are talking about. And the digital ecosystems they can be a unified ecosystem, or it can be sector specific or job specific. So whatever the ecosystem that we have developed, or we are developing, or in the process of developing, they are value addition. They are not diminishing the value of transformation, they are adding value to it. So the quality of services that are provided to the public also goes up, improving their life experience. moving on to the next article, the ugly face of a crime fighting move. So before going into this article, let us understand what facial recognition is in the first place. Right, facial recognition is simply a biometric technology that uses algorithms to identify specific and distinct features of an individual's face, to identify and differentiate among two people or a group of people. So they use physical attributes of an individual face. It uses their structure, bone structure, eye, whatever. They use physical attributes of an individual which are distinct to themselves, and they distinguish two people or three people or how many ever people are there in a group based on their distinct features by using artificial intelligence and algorithms. That is facial recognition. It is simply a biometric technology that uses algorithms, artificial intelligence, to distinguish people and identify people based upon their physical features which are unique to their own. How facial recognition works? It uses input sensors like cameras, right? Like face readers or whatever the input source may be. They use that input as a source. Primarily it is cameras, it is CCTV cameras, and they use that image and they pass that image through an algorithm where features are identified and your individual identity is revealed. It uses 3D technology, it uses facial contours, it uses how your eye, nose features, lip features and what all it uses, and it identifies you from a crowd. That is what facial recognition does, and that is how facial recognition works. What are the technologies used? It uses artificial intelligence. Primarily of most, it uses machine learning technologies or machine learning algorithms, and it has the ability to identify and sort hundreds of faces in a matter of seconds, right? Even less if the technology is that good, and the technology right now is actually that good, but there is a lot of room for improvement too. That is the facial recognition technology. Why are we discussing this? We are discussing this because the government of India decided that, or the government of India is exploring a potential facial recognition technology to be deployed in India to help our police force or security agencies, law enforcement agencies to be specific. So India is in the plans of approving the implementation of the National Automated Facial Recognition System, NAFRS. Now the reason that the government is saying is, we are trying to facilitate investigation of crime and detection of criminals, right? That was the intent behind bringing in the National Automated Facial Recognition System. Now how it will function in India? It will be a national level implementation. It will be a national level search platform that will use the said facial recognition technology, and this will be used to help investigation of crime in India, where this technology will be used to identify people, right? Where they'll compare images of faces of people from a database. You will have already this criminal database or any other database that you have, Aadhaar database or whatever it is, and you have a CCTV image of a person or an accused person or a person of interest, and you use that image to compare it with your existing database using facial recognition technology, and the person will be, him or her would be found out from this database, making investigation process easier, making investigation process simpler, and in most of the cases
বৰঠাকুৰ IS Academy
solving crimes at much faster
প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু
rates.
অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য
So the
ঠিকনা
technology is unique in the sense that regardless of the obstructions in the image, whether it may be the face mask, because of COVID-19 everybody is wearing a face mask, they may have plastic surgery done to change the contours of their face, but nonetheless there are technologies available right now that can even identify the individual even though they had gone through a medical procedure. Even if they had plastic surgery and made certain changes to their contours or their face or their physical features, artificial intelligence can pick those people out, right? So even if there are some impediments in the image, they can successfully identify the individual by checking them or checking their photo or comparing their photo against the existing database. Now let us look at the global scenario first. So this is what the National Automated Facial Recognition System is intended for and intended use case would be. The second aspect is what is the worldwide scenario. The Federal Bureau of Investigation already deployed and uses facial recognition system on Americans, on daily Americans, on average Americans on a day-to-day basis. Right? Other law enforcement agencies in America use a much advanced version on not only Americans but also on other citizens. That is the irony of it. China has been accused of using facial recognition technology on their citizens in a regressive way. Particularly, the Uyghur Muslims of Xinjiang province come to mind, where they are using this technology to identify Uyghur Muslims from population and keep tab on them. They are tracking their every movement. If they slip up, they are put up in jail. Even though if they didn't do anything illegal, just because they did something that the Communist Party said safe, so they are using this facial technology in regressive way. Now let us come to India. So what is the worry here? Same, the worry is India lacks proper data protection laws. India doesn't have a data protection bill as of right now. India brought in, or the Indian government brought in, a data protection bill in 2019, and it was given to a parliamentary subcommittee to verify it. Since 2019, that parliamentary subcommittee, which has been entrusted to study the bill in detail, had got 5 extensions. As recently as a few months back, it was given a 5th extension to study the bill in a proper way. Right? So the bill is long ways before it is being brought into an act. So there are some challenges in that front also. So the IT Act, as we know, the IT Act of 2000 is inadequate in the sense that it doesn't address a lot of concerns because it gives immense powers to the state in terms of national security, in terms of surveillance and whatnot. So that area is also challenge. Now the fear is that the NAFRS will collect, process and store sensitive information for a long periods of time. We don't know the system of how scheme of things will work if this system is implemented. We don't know whether the data that is being collected will be stored for shorter periods of time, longer periods of time, or even if for permanent or permanently. Now activists and members of civil society, both from the government within itself, from in terms of the police also, there has been some voice being raised against such systems being put in place to fight crime in India, because the idea is that these kinds of system will impact an individual's right to privacy. That is a potential given. There is no other way around it. When you are talking about implementation of facial recognition technology, the first right that is kind of impeded or infringed is their right to privacy, because you are being tracked. The moment you step out of your house, there are hundreds of CCTV cameras, and if this system is being integrated on a national level, imagine these cameras being connected to a national grid where the software is running in the background. So you are potentially being identified every time you pass a camera. So there is a greater chance, or there is absolutely 100% given chance, that a person sitting in front of a monitor can track your every movement at the moment you step out of your house. So your right to privacy is gone. With no data protection bill or personal data protection bill in place, and with its status being in abyss, the potential abuse and misuse of this technology is far and wide. Given governments, not only these governments, every government's track record around the world, once a power is given to them, the scope for misuse also exponentially increases. This is not only limited to India and relegated to India, it is the worldwide problem. Look at how the American surveillance state is right now. right? Edward Snowden made it a point in his revelations that they not only track individual movements, they read every email, every text message, every notification that an individual gets on their mobile phone and their electronic devices. That is the state of surveillance in America. If the same systems are implemented in India, there is no telling as to how far the government or the authorities are willing to go to track you to stop crime or fight crime in India. Right? That is one of the biggest worries. Now let us discuss about right to privacy. Right to privacy, when you say right to privacy in India, remember 2017 KS Puttaswamy versus Union of India case. That is the goalpost there. Always remember right to privacy. You have to remember about Uncle Puttaswamy. He is a justice actually. Don't say uncle, don't write uncle. But nonetheless, remember it to make it simpler. You remember that judgment in 2017 Justice KS Puttaswamy versus Union of India case, it recognized right to privacy as a precious fundamental right. But what does Indian Constitution or Indian Supreme Courts or whatever Indian law says? No fundamental right is absolute, right? Even in case of right to privacy. If the state finds, right, if the government finds, if the executive finds reasonable case or reasonable cause or probable cause, they may impose certain restrictions which are reasonable in nature on your fundamental rights, including right to privacy. Now that is the discussion. The second issue that this NAFRS suffers from is the test of proportionality. In the judgment, the order or the judgment laid 3 tests for any law for it to be passed, right? The test of proportionality was laid down in KS Puttaswamy versus Union of India case, and this particular technology or NAFRS scheme lacks or fails that proportionality test set up by the Puttaswamy case. What are the problems there? It lacks legitimacy. Why? Because it was not brought through act, nor it was brought through an ordinance from the government. What it was brought through was a simple ordinance, a simple approval from Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs way back in 2009. It was brought in 2009. Now we are implementing it. In 2021, we are talking about implementing it because it received approval. We might get it implemented by the end of this year or next year. Now let us assume India needs this facial recognition technology to tackle crimes in modern day. But the measures that this technology talks about are not proportionate to the reality. Right? The technology or the aggressiveness with which this technology is being deployed is not nowhere proportionally equal to the reality that exists on the ground. So that is one accusation that this bill is being, or this technology is being faced. Now when we first studied about this bill, we talked about it is being brought in to help investigation of a crime. But when you deploy this technology, there is a dichotomy of a sort here, because are we talking about crime prevention or identification? So crime prevention means even before the crime takes place, you are preventing it from happening. So in order to prevent something from happening even before it happens, you have to constantly monitor something, right? Let us say you have a leak somewhere, you have a pipeline, you have a leak somewhere, or there is a potential leak at a junction. So in order to identify that potential leak, what you do is you sit in front of it or you put a camera in front of it and you monitor it 24/7. So the first hint that you get there is going to be a leak at that junction or that joint, you get in and repair it. That is how it happens in real time. Or if you want to prevent it, you monitor it constantly so that a bigger leak doesn't happen in the future. So if that is the idea, then this technology will be deployed 24/7 basis all over India wherever cameras are available, and the citizens are being monitored 24/7. Mind you, With CCTV camera, you are just being captured, your image is being captured. They don't have the details as to where you are. They have to do tracking in order to find out who you are and where you live. They have to go back and they have to check prior footage. But with this facial recognition technology, the moment your face pops up on the screen, they can have your data, your address, your personal details on the right side of another screen. So they can actually track your movements, knowing who you are, where you live, and what you do for your livelihood. Increases the perception of these, increases the level of misuse or scope for misuse of this technology. Now, even before this comes into picture, a lot of public discourse has to take place. It has to stand the test of public acceptability, because at the end of the day, it is taking away an individual's right to privacy. So to conclude, these kinds of technologies should be studied carefully before being deployed, right? Before being deployed. And second of all, there has to be certain regulations, there has to be certain safeguards that public are aware or should when these kinds of technologies are being used. So our country is a democratic country, right? Democracy doesn't allow for anything unregulated to be used. So these kinds of technologies are regressive in nature, and they should be studied before they are being used for any reason, whatever the reason the government gives, right? Before implementing it, it has to first make it clear what their intent is, what their goal is, what are the safeguards that they are putting in place, who is the overseeing authority, what kind of oversight the people who are using this technology will have over them, and if they find any wrongdoing, if they find any case of disappropriate use or misuse, then what kind of punishment those offenders will attract. So they have to make a lot of things clear before implementing these kinds of technologies in our country. Lot of ambiguity exists in our laws, giving a lot of room for people to operate in a negative and a bad way, undemocratic way, right? That doesn't bode well for our democracy. It is not a healthy system to live in. That is why, at least to make amends or to make a refreshed start, the government, if it is really intent on bringing this technology or similar technologies in the future, first make all the parameters clear, then you bring in the law after approval or after getting acceptance from both the judiciary and the public. Without that, these kinds of laws or these kinds of technologies are not good for any society, not only our society, any society, because the cost that we end up paying after these technologies come into force, they cannot be taken back. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি, প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা। বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি।